Hey everyone, I see a lot of people just joining now, so we're going to give it another 60 seconds or so for people to come in. Thanks.
I will say, Wayne, you look like yourself in this picture. I feel like that's like that for my picture, it's kind of the proverbial realtor picture where like I don't know the last time I didn't have facial hair and also was wearing a tie. It's been a while. I'm happy that I'm back in my office. We talked about that. But
Yeah,
that is a foreign looking individual down there.
yeah. My picture's fairly recent, so it's a good depiction of the current reality, right?
We did a poll, kind of a very informal, unscientific poll in our CMO Slack community on like how recent do you think your picture needs to be, your profile picture? And I think people said the majority of people answered like wrong year to ask that question because no one really wanted to have their profile picture retaken after a year of pandemic.
Yeah,
So and there was, other than that, there was a wide variety of say, listen, like some people, like if you look the same, let's just keep it. Just if you like, have a picture you like, gives you confidence, go for it.
yeah, exactly. My gut says within 5 years.
I think that's fair.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
If it's over
Kind of
five
like,
years, 'cause at a certain point, you're like, dude, you look 30, you are 65. I think it's probably time for a new profile picture. You look fine, just like, you know, it's fine.
yes, exactly. Look at that free non-webinar centric advice for these folks that have joined us early.
Oh no, we're here for all of it. We're here for all of
That's
it.
right.
Whether you want, if anyone wants to know what kind of microphone you should get for doing your professional audio video work, anyone wants an update on the PGA Championship, I was telling Craig I got that on the TV on mute over here as well. Like we're full service here today.
All right, well, I think we can get started. This is a lot of fun. I kind of want to let you guys just keep going, ad lib, but we got a webinar to do.
Do it.
My name is Craig Simons, and I'll be moderating today's discussion. Thanks to everyone for your interest in today's session on closing the Great Divide, building a bridge between sales and marketing. This presentation is being recorded, and an on-demand recording will be emailed out in the next day or so. Now to our esteemed participants in today's discussion. Wayne St. Amand is Allego's Chief Marketing Officer and a seasoned marketing veteran. Wayne has a long track record of accelerating the growth of technology businesses, playing a key role in an IPO and 3 $100 million exits. He's joined today by Matt Heinz, founder and president of Heinz Marketing and a respected thought leader in the sales and marketing space. Matt is a repeat winner of the top 50 most influential people in sales lead management, top 50 sales and marketing influencers, and top 50 keynote speakers. Matt, Wayne, thanks for joining us. Would you like to say hello?
Hey
Yes, I would.
everyone.
Hello.
It's and Matt, did you know that we are esteemed?
I
Isn't
didn't.
that
I
fantastic?
usually apparently yes. I had this discussion with someone earlier this week. If you have to call yourself a thought leader, you're probably not a thought leader. So that language is fine. But I'm just here to share ideas.
Yeah, awesome. And hey everyone, thanks for joining us, and I'm certainly here to share ideas as well, and hopefully have an engaging conversation here with Matt and Craig. So welcome everyone.
Matt, you didn't call
And
yourself
actually,
a thought leader. I called you a thought leader. You definitely are one. So cheers to
Fair.
that.
and speaking of an engaging discussion, as we think about the divide that exists between sales and marketing, Matt and I sort of brainstormed what are the kind of key topics and explorations of data that we can do to try and narrow that divide, to bridge that divide. And today we're going to go through these 5 points here, our discussion topics that are really designed to touch on the things that you need to know, and in some cases that you need to do to try and bridge that divide. So as we go through the webinar, we're going to be hitting each one of these topics and giving you our perspectives on these things. And we also want to encourage you, if you have questions as we go, don't wait. Don't wait until the end. Ask us those questions. We'll try and incorporate those questions into the discussion and get back to you right away as part of it. We want to make this as interactive as we possibly can. So fire them away when you have them, okay? All right, great. Craig, Matt, ready to get started?
Let's do this.
Yeah, we're ready to get started. We're going to look at some LinkedIn results that Matt was able to do, and we're going to talk about who should own sales enablement, what the CMO's role is in sales enablement, how to foster sales-obsessed marketers, and the #1 secret to sales and marketing alignment. We're going to save that one till the end, so everyone has to stay tuned for that. Matt, would you like to talk a little bit about some of the research that you conducted?
Yeah, we as the three of us were sort of chatting a few months ago just about the evolution of sales enablement. Like there were some new questions that came up, but we kind of wanted to get a sense for how sales and marketing professionals were thinking about this. Like it didn't feel like it was that long ago when we did one of our first sort of like state of sales enablement research projects. And this is maybe 6-7 years ago, so not that long ago. We couldn't use the phrase sales enablement in the survey because there wasn't a consensus over what it meant. Like people didn't understand that phrase. They understood some of the components and some of the initiatives that were part of what we considered sales enablement, but it was so new at the time, we couldn't really use it. Now we're at a point where it's becoming more table stakes for leading organizations, but there is still a pretty broad spread of maturity levels, I would say, and just different applications of sales enablement across the world or across companies. So we said, okay, what are a couple core questions we could ask that could kind of get a sense for sort of what that spread looks like, and then ask some sort of multiple choice questions, and then also dig into why people answered the question that way. So LinkedIn lets you sort of add some cool poll questions and then say, okay, tell us the why in the comments. And we were able to get some really interesting data. So first question we asked, just pretty simple, yes or no, true or false, do you consider yourself in sales enablement? And I think, Craig, before we reveal what LinkedIn said, I want to find out what people here think of this.
All right, I just launched a poll. If everyone can just go ahead and vote yes or no. Good participation today. 81% of you have voted. That's pretty solid. I'm going to close it there. Oh, wow, this is really interesting. So the poll results are 92% yes, 8% no.
Wow.
And
Wow.
if we look at how our survey respondents responded.
Drum roll, please.
Wow.
You can't make this up. You can't make this up. And I was a little surprised two ways, and I know like I'm contradicting myself. I was surprised to see so many people in the survey consider themselves in sales enablement, but then also was surprised at the no's. Like there was, 9% of people saying no was fine, but when I dug in and looked at like who said no, like there were marketing leaders, there were field marketing managers, there were sales trainers that said, no, I'm not in sales enablement. So surprising a lot of, but I think generally good news that 9 out of 10 people that we polled, sales and marketing executives, people in B2B organizations, saw themselves cross-department. We saw accountants, we saw people in finance, people in product that said, yes, I'm in sales enablement. And Wayne, that's a good trend. That's a really positive trend.
Yeah, it's a fantastic trend, Matt. What we've seen, you spoke to, a few years ago, the challenges with even using the term. How is it defined? People can understand this. The world has really changed quite a bit, certainly over the last few years, where you see people that actually hold the title sales enablement. You see software companies, vendors that position themselves specifically as sales enablement companies. You see industry analysts like Gartner and Forrester with sales enablement practices, right? So it is a real thing. We often talk about people who don't have the title feeling like their spirit animal is sales enablement, right?
Mm-hmm.
They are driven to make sales teams successful, no matter what they do. And that's a fantastic thing. And I think that's what we see reflected here in this 91%.
Yeah, definitely a solid trend. But anytime we do research like this, I'm always very curious, like who said no? And I found a bunch of people that I know that I would have assumed I should say yes, and they said no. I'm like, So I literally, like, just a curious guy, just called them and said, like, hey, A, why did you said no? And B, would you join us on a webinar to talk about that? And so they said, yes, I will tell you why I said no, but no, I'm not going to join your webinar because I don't necessarily want people to think that I'm a laggard, right? That I'm not doing. And so the answers we got back pretty consistently from a handful of people that I talked to that said no are summarized here, right? And I think that you're going to see in many of our answers and some of the discussions how important culture is in organizations to create sales and marketing alignment, and how important the culture and org structure is to whether or not people feel like they are sometimes enabled, pun intended, to do sales enablement. So some people said this is a sales function, it's not a marketing function, right? Some people just believe that sales enablement is a sales function. Some people said, no, that's actually just not something I have responsibility of doing. Not in their objectives, right? Their objectives are focused elsewhere. So if your OKRs are defined in one way, your smart people are going to go focus in that area and say, even if opportunistically I could own something else, if I succeed at that but don't succeed at my OKRs, I'm in trouble, right? So you're pointing people towards the cheese that you say they care about. The third one was interesting, Wayne, where we did see this constriction of what some people thought of as sales enablement. They said, well, that's onboarding and training. That's what the sales team does to make their people well. It's not a marketing function. I heard that from people that are creating content and providing support tools and processes, but saw a narrower definition of what sales enablement is. And I guess this is part of the evolution of what we see for companies that are in this space, but curious sort of your feedback on some of these responses from the no's.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is clearly the most literal, right, among us, where if my title does not say sales enablement and my, role description does not have sales enablement literally specifically spelled out in it, then I'm not in sales enablement. I don't consider myself in sales enablement. And, we like to think that everybody who is attached to a sales team in any way, shape, or form has any responsibility for helping to drive the success of that sales team through any medium, whether you're building content as a marketer that's used as a sales tool, or you're somebody who is, delivering training, onboarding, launch, presentation coaching, any of those things. That's all sales enablement. And I like to think everybody in the company has a role to play in driving sales success. So, we're all enablers of one sort or another.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think that some of this, if you don't feel like you are able to focus on the things that are going to really sort of drive metrics that you can buy a beer with, if you don't feel like you can actually sort of pivot what you're doing, like that's a organizational challenge that may not happen, may not be resolved in a half-hour meeting, but definitely is pointing towards some of the obstacles you need to address as an organization, especially for leaders listening to this. Like, allow your people to pivot where they think they're going to have the most impact. And that the definition of that is changing, and the lines between departments are blurring significantly.
Yeah, agreed.
Thanks, Matt. And the next survey question that we polled people on LinkedIn was related to kind of what level of sales enablement their team is at from a marketing, supporting, sellers standpoint. And we had these four options. There was people that marketers just publish the content. Then there's that publish it and actually train the marketers on, or train the sellers on how to use it. And then there's the ones that publish, train, and measure the impact. And then the ones that do all of that and they have activation strategies.
Yeah. So we were trying in this question to sort of get that sort of good, better, best, try to sort of say, where are you in the maturity curve of what you're doing? Knowing that, look, there aren't necessarily wrong answers here. There's just sort of, where are you today in this progression? What level, how deep do you go in providing that deeper sales enablement support? And I think this is one where we also, Craig, want to get a sense for how our attendees today, at least our live attendees, how they're thinking about this.
Yes. The poll is up. The votes are coming in.
How closely do we think this is going to match what we saw in the broader survey?
Too close to guess. I think this is a more complex one.
Yeah.
Okay, there's a question. What do we mean by activation? Why don't we just briefly describe that before we close the poll here?
Yeah, I'll chime in on that. So activation is about providing the context along with the content that helps the seller understand the creator's intent, right? How do I use this? What's the best practice? When do I use it? It's not just foundational training, it's sort of like on-demand training associated, or rather on-demand context associated with that content. So hopefully that's helpful.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. All right, so let's see. So we had 58% said publish and train how to use. 25% said they do everything. 17% publish, train, and measure. And nobody said publish only.
Interesting. Wow, that's great. A little more advanced group, certainly, it sounds like here in terms of how they're thinking about this. It was when we did this survey on LinkedIn a few weeks ago, it was a positive trend to see the 44% doing everything. I don't think we would have seen that a couple years ago, certainly 5 or 6 years ago we talked about at the beginning. So that is very much a positive trend to me. It's not surprising to see that the publish and train was higher than publish, train, and measure. The measurement part can be elusive, right? And we've had some people come back and say, well, what am I measuring? Am I measuring them using it? Am I measuring, how, which tools they use versus other? Am I measuring whether they use it and then whether it has an impact when they use it? I'm like, yes, all of those things. Any of that would be a positive start. But also, again, I think our audience for this research are, more advanced B2B sales and marketing professionals and B2B teams, and still, Dwayne, only 20% are there's still a 20% group that is publish only. They literally, sometimes we'll just joke and say, well, are you just creating content and throwing it over the wall? No wonder 90% of your sales content goes unused, and yet we still have a significant portion, 1 out of 5, that's a material number, are still in publish only.
Yeah, one of the things that we see often in our own business, Matt, we're a vendor in this space. We work with hundreds of the best companies in the world who are figuring this stuff out along with us, and we have the opportunity to coach them, and we see most often those first two, publish only, publish and train how to use, right, when we first start working with them, and the opportunity is to go to these more advanced stages of publishing, training, and measuring, and then ultimately activating in a very agile way that works to enable the sellers to be more successful. Again, we keep coming to that, and it is an opportunity to help bridge that divide, right? Get all of the teams that are normally operating in silos communicating and collaborating and working together towards that shared goal of enablement and sales success.
Exactly. Well, this is another question where, we said, okay, for those that are publishing only, I looked in that list and I'm like, I see some people that I would have expected to be doing a little bit more, right? Or people that just in general, people that I know that I feel like I could call and ask, why are you only publishing, and would you join this webinar? And consistently, again, yes, I will tell you I am publishing only. No, I'm not going to show my face. If you can do one of those Dateline NBC things, maybe, but we don't have that kind of technology here. So here's some of the things that I heard most consistently when we said, okay, why are you publishing only? The training and reinforcement, again, I've talked about roles, right? Training and reinforcement, that's a sales thing. I had someone tell me directly, they said, I want to do this, but my sales team says, no, we will do the publishing. We don't want marketing at all hands meetings, right? Think about all the sort of issues related to that. The not enough time and bandwidth was the one that I heard the most, right? And so this is the idea of saying, you're creating content for sales, but you have so much else on your plate that you barely have time to get what you think is the right content out. And you say, sales is going to have to just figure it out on their own. To me, and again, I don't mean to jump into the analysis on this, but if you're going to create content and not enable it, not activate it, geez, why just spend time on the content to begin with? Could you create less content and spend more time activating and maximizing the use and impact of the content you create, even if it's less? And the third one is just sort of lack of tools to measure or activate. On one hand, I could say just show up at your all hands meetings and have a set of talking points, but the ability to measure whether this is working, and for some companies to say well, why are we creating more content? Don't they already have the content they need? If you can't measure what they're using and what's working, hard to justify coming up with more content or spending more time even updating old content. So Wayne, I mean, these are not uncommon excuses or reasons why someone might be publishing only, but they sure seem like constraints to be able to get more out of a sales enablement effort.
Yeah, Matt, as we've discussed in the past, I think people who have this responsibility, oftentimes it's marketing, have a checkbox mentality because they are constantly fighting fires, right, as they go. And they have a sort of produce, release, run away, or run to the next fire kind of attitude about content. And that's why we see so many in this kind of publish only or maybe publish in basic training kind of buckets. And that does not get you working together with your sales team. I mean, your opportunity really is to co-create with your sales team, right? To really understand them, to work collaboratively with them. Because it's really, really easy to produce content that's just a little bit wrong, and then it's 100% wrong for the sales team, right? And it doesn't get used, and what happens is sales teams end up redoing the work for the marketer, and that freaks us all out completely as marketers. We don't want this situation, right?
Right.
All right, let's go to the next question, which is, which sales enablement function is the greatest challenge for your organization? And I'm going to go ahead and launch the poll.
So we did not ask for laggards in this one. This was more where we just sort of said, okay, like, you know, there's constraints and challenges in each of these, which is the greatest, and we thought it really interesting to see where people are struggling the most.
Unfortunately, the poll, I must have double clicked, so no one had time, and I can't reopen the poll. So we'll just have to show the survey results. Apologies on that.
No, we can blame Citrix for that. It's fine. You just got to blame someone.
Yeah.
It's not you, Craig. It's Citrix's fault.
Here's how they responded.
Yeah. I'm going to stay on my horse here, Wayne, and just continue to say that you know, politics and culture in organizations is the silent killer of good intentions for doing better sales and marketing alignment. You know, I think your ability to say, we know you know what the right thing is, but not have the ability to integrate that across departments, not just sales and marketing. I mean, when we talk about sales enablement, a lot of the content and insights we create as marketers is valuable to customer success and account management and renewals teams, let alone just the sales organization. But if everyone's working in silos and has different objectives and has their different set of what they need to focus on, you know, in a large organization, in a matrix organization, in a work from anywhere organization, this just gets harder. You know, cracking this nut can have a significant impact, but I was not surprised to see a third of people say collaboration.
And Matt, I think when we talked about this data earlier, you know, but before we had collected the answers, I think you had mentioned maybe that your gut had told you data-driven insights could have been one of the hot buttons. And then of course we do the survey and we see, oh look, cross-team collaboration at 32%. You know, fundamentally, every tool out there gives you data, and you could potentially develop insights from that data, so that exists in abundance. I would argue the problem is actually coming up with actionable things from all of that data that you're collecting. But the real challenge, and again, we see it again all the time in our customer base, is the struggle to stay aligned, right? To get teams truly collaborating and communicating on a regular basis so they can operate in unison, right? We all have these sales and marketing motions that we're working. Those motions are made more powerful if they're done together, right? If they're co-created, co-executed, aligned, and alongside one another, they become much more powerful. But we can see from the data, like, this simple thing of working together is the hardest thing to do. And I wonder, you know, we won't necessarily know from this data, Matt, but I wonder if the pandemic has gotten in the way here because people can't work beside one another. They can't sort of pop into someone's office. Everything has to be a Slack, or everything has to be a scheduled online meeting of some sort. So it might be that some of I suppose we can hope as we get more back to normal, that some of this will dissipate, without, the dependence on so many technologies that maybe more disconnect us than connect us, maybe more, remove us being a united force and a highly collaborative force than help us in this regard.
It's going to be a really fascinating variable to watch. I think that, you could argue that if there are executive mandates that teams work more closely together, then, being on Slack or being in Zoom or being on GoToWebinar versus, being in person should be less of a barrier. But, I think that variable certainly makes it easier to say, to just say, we're going to just work in silos. We're going to do our work on our own and pass it along to each other. And easy does not always equal effective. So I think that, leaning in on things that are complex and hard here, I think we've seen ample evidence that companies that have leaned into that hard, leaned into that complexity are seeing significantly greater results from their efforts.
Yeah, you bet.
All right. Thank you guys for that. The next topic that we wanted to discuss is who the heck should own sales enablement? When people said sales enablement, it really just used to mean sales content management, which was typically led by marketers. But now that sales enablement has a broader definition and also includes learning and training and coaching, and all in one platform in a lot of cases, it's now a question: is it sales? Is it L&D? Is it marketing? Who should own this? Should we even call it sales enablement? Should it be revenue enablement so that it's not so specific? Would love your thoughts on that.
Matt, you want me to go first? You want to go first?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. So sales enablement, we're here at Allego, we're fond of saying that we work with sales enablers in all their forms, right? There's the classic sales enablement owners, obviously people who have that title, as well as folks like sales trainers or learning and development professionals who work with sales teams, and then the broad variety of people in marketing whose entire existence should be about driving revenue performance, especially in a B2B organization, right? Typically, we see product marketing playing a really active role in sales enablement. But fundamentally, all of those groups should be working in unison to own sales enablement. It seems perhaps like a trite answer, but this collaboration and communication challenge that we have, the core is overcoming that, is working together and is co-creating in tight alignment with one another, unified by the idea that we're all in the business growth business, right? And the sales team is ultimately responsible for that. So getting aligned around that sales enablement function says, hey, it doesn't matter what my title says, my spirit animal, I've said it before, my spirit animal is sales enablement, and I'm in the sales enablement business.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I think I like that a lot. I think, I like the idea of calling it revenue enablement because it then creates the insight, the idea that you're supporting the entire customer life cycle, not just acquisition. It makes it more complicated. Now it's not just coordinating between sales and marketing. You've got a customer success account management team, a renewals team involved as well. I've heard some people describe this as buyer enablement, which, constrains it to the journey or constrains it to the funnel, perhaps the top of the funnel, or the acquisition funnel, so to speak, but at least it sort of reinforces, like, this isn't just about how we sell, this is enabling people to buy, right? And that mindset can actually help you put the right message and the right approach forward. Look, I can make a case for this to be in sales, I can make a case for this to be in marketing, I can make a case for this to be similar to revenue, and that a lot of people own it and different people have different components to it. So if it isn't owned in your organization today, if you are in marketing and you're listening to this, I think this is a great opportunity for marketing to step up and have a more revenue responsible organization. If marketing historically in your company is thought of as the arts and crafts department or thought of as the lead generators, The closer you get to the money as a marketing team, the better off you are. The closer you get to metrics you can buy a beer with, the better you are. Even if there is a sales training team that you're liaising with, I think that's a word, liaisoning. It's not you're coordinating with. If you're coordinating with the sales trainers, that's fine, but there's a function here beyond just creating content and throwing it over the wall that will make you better. And I would take that a step further to say, depending on the size of your market, depending on what your addressable market looks like, I've seen some organizations pull away from doing more work on demand gen and do more on the sales enablement front. Like if you're selling into a smaller market, a more known market, like getting more people to find you on Google, getting the same people to fill out more forms may not be as important as helping condition people to engage with your sales team at the top of the funnel. So marketers, this is an opportunity to step up and play a greater, more direct revenue responsible role in the organization.
Yeah, I'll go one step further and say, if you're in marketing, if you're in training, if you have the sales enablement function, you should be chasing bottlenecks, right? Every sales team has bottlenecks, has friction points in the sales process. Go find them and solve for them. Take your own personal superpower and apply it to breaking open those bottleneck points for sales. You will be a hero in your organization, and it's a real way to stand out for sure.
Absolutely.
Great. And the next discussion topic is related, but specific to the CMO, looking at this from a leadership perspective.
I'll start with this one.
Yeah, go for it, Matt.
Yeah, no, I think a CMO, I've seen many CMOs say, well, it's hard for me to really own and have responsibility for something sales is doing because I don't have control over that. Do you think the sales team has control over who's going to buy? Do you think the sales team has control over whether their projections are going to work? Like, no, let's assume that control now is not something that any of us have control over. CMOs, as I talked about before, need to play a more direct role in driving this, and it doesn't mean you're giving up on brand. It doesn't mean you're giving up on creating a market and creating awareness and creating the air cover a company needs to grow. But it does mean that the role is getting closer to the customer and closer to the sale. And if you were to convert, as you said, Wayne, earlier, if you were to convert this from sales enablement to revenue enablement, my point becomes an even more emphatic yes, that this is something that modern CMOs and B2B especially should own.
Yeah, because revenue is everyone's job, literally everyone in the company. That's why the company exists. So I agree with you there, right? It's more about a business initiative than it is about a title or a role or a department, right? I can tell you, I'll speak to this question from the perspective of what I do in my organization. And I'm going to give you some really, really simple advice here. And that is, you have to spend time outside of your box as a CMO. Your most comfortable place is going to be to live inside your marketing house, working with your marketing people on your marketing initiatives, drinking the Kool-Aid and drinking the rarefied air of marketing. But this is the enemy, ultimately, of sales success in your company. You need to be spending 50 plus, maybe 75+% of your time outside of that marketing box with your sales team, right? Harder than ever now because of the pandemic and everybody's operating virtually, but there are a lot of tools that let you experience the sales dynamic, right? Let you experience what sales is experiencing as they interact with prospects during sales cycles. If you spend time with them, listen to those calls, watch the prospects' interactions with your sales teams. By the way, your sales teams who are using the pitch that you developed, the slides that your team created, the messaging that your team put together, you will know if you've got a winner or not, right? And then you will have a strong foundation to stand on in working with the rest of your team and the head of sales, because you've spent time in their world. So get out of your world, get out of your box, your comfort zone, spend time with sales, talk to your sales leadership if you're a CMO. I mean, I've seen data from industry analysts that say that in some organizations, sales leaders and marketing leaders are only talking 4 times a year. So the quarterly cadence or the QBR cadence, that is insanity. I talk with my sales leader in a formal way every week, right? 52 times a year. We're aligned. We understand each other's problems, right? So, don't just preach this. You have to do it yourself, and stay connected outside of your box to the sales challenges.
Great. Thank you, Wayne. I just wanted to take a brief moment to let everyone know about some new content from Allego that may interest you. It's the complete guide to sales content management, how to organize, manage, and activate content to accelerate sales. This is very much on topic with what Matt and Wayne have been speaking about. If you haven't seen it yet, it's well worth the price, which is free. Download it at allego.com/content-2021. If you don't use a hyphen, that's fine too. You'll still get there. All right. Now, the next thing is, how do we foster sales-obsessed marketers on our team? Matt, you want to start?
Yeah, I think a couple things. One, the more you put their objectives and incentives and compensation tied to sales results, the more you will sort of push your sales team to start thinking about sales results. Like you can sit up at sales kickoff and say we're aligned with the sales organization, but if your marketing team is still measured based on the most leads at the lowest possible cost, that's not sales obsessed, right? Like we just talked about the uncomfortability of a CMO embracing revenue goals that they don't necessarily have control over. Like create a safe environment for your team to go embrace that as well. And like say, listen, we're going to embrace goals and objectives that are outside our control, that are focused on the revenue and sales outcome for the business. And there's going to be things we do differently. There's going to be things we fail at, but I'm okay with failure as long as you're focused on the right outcome as we learn and create a more sales-centric culture in this organization. That's one. Two, like encourage your sales reps or your marketers to listen in on more sales calls. Like literally be like the listener on mute for your for sales calls. Like join the Zoom calls and listen in. Ask your sales reps to record those calls so you can listen as well. Like if you've got a tool that allows you to automatically sort of engage with some of those sales calls and listen to them on demand or archived, use that as well. Like invest time in hearing directly, first person, the voice of the prospect. Your content, your sales enablement will be better the better you understand what your sales team is facing on a daily basis.
Yeah, really great points, Matt. I'll add to that. This might sound a little hokey, but it can get you sort of vision aligned on the team. Make marketing about winning, not doing. So often marketers jump to the tactic. I'm going to do this thing, right? They don't spend as much time thinking about how does this tactic route back to a strategy, and how does that strategy route back to the sales win, right? So this, you can align around revenue goals. You can make incentive compensation tied almost exclusively to the wins, right? The revenue targets is something at Allego that we do, right? All of our marketing incentive compensation is tied to sales performance, not to the doing of activities, right? I'm going to run this many programs which are going to produce this many leads. You have to have those goals. Of course you have to, because those are leading indicators. But again, where the rubber meets the road, if you can make the output focused on the wins, the sales wins, rather than just the activities, it aligns the activities to the winning. And that's really, that's how you get that sales obsession.
Thanks, Wayne. We just got a question. I'm going to mispronounce her name. It's either Helene or Helena. How do you go from a production mindset as a company, where production drives most company decisions, to a sales mindset that supports sales enablement across the organization?
This is a very, I think, a good and interesting question, because production is required, right? Like you have to do things, right? I think it goes back to this idea or at least one idea is that it goes back to this idea of really chasing the bottleneck, right? We are, as a team, always looking at the metrics and the sticking points, right? Especially at points of conversion, right? Where one thing, one particular kind of marketing output perhaps converts into a sales output, like, for example, the conversion point between MQLs and SQLs. That's a natural handoff between two organizations that maps a lot of marketing activity and converts into a lot of sales activity. If that conversion rate, for example, at that point or anywhere else in the funnel begins to struggle, you as an organization need to chase that bottleneck, need to find what it is. And it could be that you've asked people to say something in their discovery calls too soon in a process. They jump sort of too deep into the discussion too quickly, right? Well, if that's the hiccup point in the calls, then you as a marketer need to work on the scripting that drives that bottleneck to be broken and increases the conversion rates at those points. So there's obviously a lot of activities, a lot of production involved in each one of these things, but it has to be production with a purpose, right? You always have to keep the win or the eventual win in mind. And if you can, again, if you can find, chase, and break those bottlenecks and really think about your activities in those terms, the impact is going to be more substantial, it's going to be faster, and you're going to be, again, more greatly tied to those wins.
Yeah. Thank you, Wayne. Go ahead, Matt. Did you want to chime in?
I agree. And, unfortunately, in some cases, you'll have a CEO that likes, volume versus impact and thinks doing more things and sending more campaigns is better. You have boards that get used to the slide showing the up and to the right lead volume that grows every month. Data's your friend. Point out the places where you're seeing the biggest impact. I'll never forget one of my first clients 13 years ago. Like, I cut off 90% of their search budget. And before the sales team threw me out the window because most of their leads were coming from paid search, I pointed out that that 90% of those leads were like literally not converting. It was more their cold calling was more effective than working with those leads. So the data helped me not get thrown out the window and helped me tell a story that said, hey, listen, we're going to focus on what's effective, not just what makes us look good.
Yeah, do what matters most, right, Matt?
Yep.
Great. And now the discussion topic I think everyone is waiting for. What is the number one secret to sales and marketing alignment?
We made people wait 43 minutes for the answer to this question. It better pay off. No, there's no pressure, Wayne.
Yeah, no pressure on either one of us here. And I think, look, there are a lot of potential answers here. I would say I'm going to debunk one of the most popular answers as a way to answer this question. One of the most popular answers to kind of aligning sales and marketing is to give both groups the same goal, right? Let's give marketing a revenue target, or a pipeline growth target, just like we give sales those targets. And that is helpful. And I would definitely recommend that you do that to align people at the highest level. But what I think I've found and over my career and what I've seen across multiple businesses is that doesn't feel very tangible to most marketers. They're like, wow, geez, that's way out of my control, right? I'm way back here or way up here early in the funnel, and I just can't see how what I'm doing is going to turn into a revenue achievement on a salesperson's behalf, right? One of the things that you should do is reverse engineer those lofty goals of revenue into all the actions required, operationally speaking, to achieve those goals. So the idea here is don't just be goal aligned, but be operationally aligned, which requires co-creation, right? It requires alignment, collaboration, communication. You naturally end up working together, fighting in the trenches together, sharing in the same battles. And those things build the kind of collaboration, dare I say it, friendships between the groups, dependencies and trust between the groups, that kind of operational alignment, it makes it real. It makes it tangible for the marketing teams. And for the sales teams, they can see how you're in the trenches with them and fighting with them because you're working on the same things together. So that operational alignment is key, not just goal alignment. And I think most of us, because we're busy, we end it right with goal alignment. We don't reverse engineer that back to the operations required to drive the outcomes, which are those goals. That's one perspective.
Yeah, I think Wayne, we're completely aligned on this, and we kind of have a different angle on the same answer. I think for me, the number one secret is triple D. Not diners, drive-ins, and dives for you Food Network fans, but it's triple D. It's the daily dirty details. It's what you need to do every day between sales and marketing to operationalize this alignment to what you said. It's one thing to sort of agree on goals at sales kickoff. It's another thing to know what you should be doing Tuesday morning. We'll say a lead comes in. Like, what does sales do with that? Do they do anything? Is it the right kind of lead? Do we agree on whether it's a good lead? What happens next? How much follow-up? With what message? Does that message align with what they already saw from marketing, or is it a whole different message? How do we forget inbound leads? How do we make sure we're going after the right target accounts? Do we have the right criteria? Are we evaluating it the right way? What's the flow two-way of leads and accounts and opportunities between sales and marketing across different systems? Like, it gets pretty detailed pretty quickly. And if you don't, it's not about having the tech stack. It's about having a strategy and then putting processes in place to enable that strategy and making it easy for your teams, for your marketing leaders, for your marketing frontline folks, for your sales reps and BDRs to know how to apply that strategy at an operational frontline level consistently on a daily basis in a way that maximizes their active sales time and increases the consistency and predictability of the output of all of those efforts. Like, technology can help enable and stream a lot of that work, but it starts with sort of a flexible, agile sales playbook and sales enablement playbook, which is really a lot of checklists and processes that are applied consistently. That level of detail, those dirty daily details, to me, are the number one secret to operationalizing and making successful everything we've talked about today.
Awesome. Thank you for that. We do have a couple questions, and if anyone else still has any questions or thoughts about anything Matt and Wayne have discussed, you can throw them in the questions panel or the chat panel. I'll see them. What specific metrics should people be thinking about, showing the board or their leadership team or the sales and marketing team with regards to the effectiveness and the ROI of sales enablement? And maybe there's different metrics for each of those three groups, right? What does the board care about? What does the leadership team care about? And then what do you share with the sales and marketing teams?
Yeah, so I can speak to the kind of board level. And by the way, this answer is going to be a little bit different depending on what department you're in, right? Each department's metrics are going to be a bit different. But one of the key things that you need to be thinking about when you think about sales enablement is the idea that you are trying to change behaviors. You're trying to change patterns, right, of sellers with the goal of making them more effective. Or if they have great habits, great behaviors, you want to amplify those. You want to maximize them, right? So what the board or the executive team is going to care about are those kind of high level, summary level, kind of outcome oriented metrics that show the patterns and the outcomes of behavior change, right? So if a company has just released a new product and the sales team needs to understand that product and be successful at sort of pushing that product forward, and you don't actually have sales yet, maybe you're early in the launch stages and phases, you should be using software to capture those training exercises that you're doing with the team and understanding how good are those pitches, either rated by some AI algorithm or by their sales manager coaches. to show how they are in fact changing their behaviors from the old pitch to the new pitch. So what percentage of the sales force has successfully made the transition from old message and old product to new message and new product, and how prepared are they to take that to the market, right? The exec team and your board are going to be very interested in high level outcomes, right? Not in every single little detail. The individual teams care very much about those details, and your reporting has to go to that level within the team. But the executive level functions, they want to know, are we primed for the outcome that we're planning for? Are the various teams changing their behaviors in such a way that they can actually achieve these things? So keep those things in mind.
Yeah, I'd agree with all that. Just one quick thing to add. I think when we talk about ROI or return on effort, two variables you want to also measure is time and money, right? Like too often we talk about the volume of results we got, but we don't put it in the context of the economics of the business. Like, even if you're spending more money on leads, more money on generating opportunities, like, are those opportunities better for you? Not only because they convert better, or maybe they give you a longer lifetime value and a lower churn rate because of the right type of customers. So put the money in context. Also time. I've seen some companies say we're investing more in sales enablement because we are shortening our sales cycles, right? Like having your sales team spend less time on the sales process allows those same people to manage more deals. Same number of people, bigger pipeline, more closed business, like that also benefits you, right? So if you're measuring return on time and money variables, you can tell another great important picture, another great story about the effectiveness of the sales enablement efforts in front of you.
Yeah, that's great. That's really
Thank you. We have time for just one last question, and then we'll wrap up. But how do you handle the sensitivity around taking salespeople off the phones, right? A lot of the things you guys are talking about, operational alignment, improving collaboration, they require some seller time getting, off the phones and working directly with marketers, which could be seen as a threat to hitting their quota because their time is so valuable. How do you handle that sensitivity?
Well, the research I've seen shows that B2B sales reps today, in general, on average, only spend about 25% of their time actively selling. So let's not pretend that just by putting some training in front of people that all of a sudden we're going to take them off the phones for a significant amount of time. They're already off the phones for a significant amount of time. What I would do is I would question the efficacy of some of the things they're already spending their time doing. The number one time waster for sales reps when they're not actively selling is time in CRM. What could you do to tighten up the amount of time they spend in CRM between calls and use some of that saved time to better equip and activate and train your sales reps to be more effective? You also see sales reps spending 30 minutes doing research for a prospect and then leaving a 40-second voicemail. That's not very good use of time. What about the sales reps that have to write their own emails, and you've got 40 people in the sales force writing the same email 40 times and then probably writing it over because they got no place to save it and they don't remember what they wrote a week ago, right? So like there are lots of places where there's inefficiency in that non-active selling time. A portion of that can be used towards these activities we've talked about today to not only increase active selling time from your baseline today, but make that active selling time significantly more valuable.
Yeah. All totally valid points. The thing that I would add, and it's maybe a little bit of an alternative perspective, is make these activities as on demand as possible, which means you need to kind of think about them as asynchronous activities. Oftentimes what happens is enablement activities get forced on salespeople, right? It needs to be purely a scheduled event. We're going to carve out X number of hours and we're going to train you, or you need to show up at this appointed time and do these things and take these tests and then do stand and deliver, right? So much now can be done asynchronously with, the right tools, the right approaches, that it can be on demand. It can, this kind of enablement activity, training, other things can be provided as a resource that when the rep is ready, within a given time frame, right? Everybody needs a deadline. But when the rep is ready, whether it be 7 in the morning or 7 at night or anywhere in between, they can go initiate that process and sort of self-guide through that process, and do it again in a kind of in an offline, asynchronous way, so it becomes something that flows into their work rather than truly interruptive, right? So lots of perspectives there. I think both of them very good.
Not surprising. We got 3 questions. What's asynchronous? Yeah, it basically it's not live, right? It's the email, for example, is an asynchronous communication tool, or a recorded video that somebody can watch on their own time. So it is a scary or long word, but it's quite simple and really powerful.
This is synchronous, right?
Yep.
When we capture the recording and then make it available to someone to watch whenever they want, that's that content being delivered asynchronously. So,
yep, perfect. Okay, well, thank you to everyone for joining us today. And as a reminder, we'll be sending out the recording so you can watch this asynchronously once it's available and can share with your team. We'd love to hear from you about your sales enablement and sales coaching efforts and content management activation efforts. Get in touch with us by requesting a demo at allego.com. We'd love to connect with you. And again, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Wayne, for your valued insights today. And everyone, have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you later.
Bye-bye.